Beneath the heart of Rome stands a city within a city, ringed by ancient walls and crowned with a basilica whose dome rises like a marble planet over the skyline. To millions, it is the spiritual center of Catholicism, the seat of the Pope, a place of worship and pilgrimage. Yet for as long as it has existed, whispers have trailed behind its colonnades. Whispers of hidden vaults, forbidden manuscripts, secret rituals, and powers older than Christianity itself. The Vatican has been painted in the public imagination as both guardian of faith and keeper of mysteries, a paradox that fuels endless fascination. Walk across St. Peter's Square at dawn, when the cobblestones are still cool and pigeons wheel above the obelisk, and you can feel the weight of centuries. Every column, every statue, every symbol carved into the travertine seems to echo with invisible stories. Visitors see art and devotion. Historians see layers of empire, syncretism, and politics. Mythmakers, however, glimpse something else, a stage where the sacred and the esoteric might have once shared the same script. According to legend, when the early church moved from the catacombs to imperial favor, it inherited not only power but also knowledge. Ancient texts confiscated from temples, magical formulas from conquered peoples, grimoires suppressed by emperors. All of it, so the stories claim, was brought into the Church's custody. Over the centuries, the Vatican Library became the focal point of these tales. Officially founded in the 15th century by Pope Nicholas V, it contains one of the world's greatest collections of manuscripts. Unofficially, at least in the popular imagination, it is a labyrinth of sealed rooms holding scrolls from Alexandria, prophecies of forgotten sibyls, and diagrams of rituals banned since antiquity. No reliable evidence confirms that such forbidden texts exist in the depths of the Apostolic Library, but the absence of proof has never dulled the rumor. Renaissance scholars themselves fed the fire. Some hinted at secret readings granted only to the highest clergy, while others accused the papal court of hoarding wisdom to maintain control. The reality is that many manuscripts are restricted simply for preservation. Yet the combination of secrecy, power, and myth is irresistible. It invites the question that opens our journey. How much of what we think we know about the Vatican's hidden side is rooted in fact, and how much springs from the very human impulse to imagine a deeper mystery? To answer that, we must travel back in time, long before the Vatican existed, to understand the world from which these myths emerged. The site itself sits on the Vatican Hill, once outside the city walls of ancient Rome. In pre-Christian times, this area was associated with burial grounds, gardens, and even a small temple to a goddess named Cybele, whose cult came from Anatolia and involved ecstatic rites. Roman authors mention a Vaticanus, a prophetic spirit connected to infants' cries, and to augury, the reading of omens. Whether or not this etymology is exact, it hints at how the hill already carried associations of prophecy and the threshold between life and death. By the time St. Peter, according to tradition, was martyred and buried nearby, the hill had a reputation as a liminal space, a fitting stage for myths of hidden knowledge. Early Christians were not strangers to mystery traditions. The Mediterranean of the first century was a crossroads of secret cults, mystery schools, and esoteric philosophies. From the rites of Mithras to the teachings of Neoplatonism, ideas about hidden wisdom circulated freely. When the Church gradually became dominant, it faced the challenge of defining orthodoxy while absorbing, transforming, or rejecting these influences. Some practices were reinterpreted, others condemned as magic. Over time, the Church built a sharp conceptual wall between sacrament and sorcery. But legends insist that not everything was discarded. They suggest that certain formulas, symbols, and calendars were quietly preserved, coded into liturgy, art, and architecture. Consider the obelisk in St. Peter's Square. Originally erected in Heliopolis and brought to Rome by Emperor Caligula, it stood beside the Circus of Nero, witnessing executions of Christians. In 1586, Pope Sixtus V ordered it moved to the center of the new square as a symbol of triumph over paganism. Yet an obelisk is also an Egyptian solar emblem. To mythmakers, its presence seems like a thread connecting Vatican ritual to the magic of pharaohs. The Church explains it differently, a pagan monument baptized into Christian meaning. Both readings coexist in the public mind. feeding the sense that the Vatican operates as a vast palimpsest, erasing and rewriting symbols across time. This tension between official narrative and esoteric rumor is the lifeblood of our story. On one side stands documented history, popes commissioning scholars, preserving texts, regulating ritual. On the other side swirl the legends, vaults under the secret archives containing instructions for summoning angels, hidden astrological charts guiding papal elections, coded messages about the end of the world. Some of these tales originated in anticlerical satire, others in sincere mystical speculation. All of them reveal something about how societies perceive power and mystery. The phrase secret archives itself is a translation trap. In Latin, archivum secretum simply means private or personal archives, not secret in the modern sense of forbidden. Yet the mistranslation has done more to build the Vatican's aura of secrecy than any real policy could. Even after the collection was renamed the Vatican Apostolic Archive in 2019, the older title continues to fuel conspiracy books and speculative documentaries. It's a reminder that language can be as powerful as architecture in shaping myths. By beginning here, in the square, under the dome, before the obelisk, we place ourselves at the crossroads of fact and legend. Our path through this narrative will follow the echoes of ancient magic, the fears that once defined heresy, and the fragments of forbidden knowledge that still glitter in imagination. We will trace how myths about the Vatican arose, how they evolved, and what they reveal about humanity's hunger for hidden truths. We will listen to both the archivist and the storyteller, the historian and the pilgrim, knowing that the line between them is often thin. And as we walk deeper into this labyrinth of stories, one question will guide us. Why do such myths endure, generation after generation, across cultures and continents? Perhaps because every great institution casts a shadow, and in that shadow the collective imagination paints its most vivid pictures. Or perhaps because the Vatican, as a living symbol of continuity, invites projection of everything we fear or hope about knowledge itself. Either way, the legend persists. It stands like the dome over the square, visible, impressive, and concealing a vast interior still to be explored. To understand how the myths surrounding the Vatican took root, we have to step fully into the world of late antiquity, where belief and power were inseparable, and where written knowledge itself was treated as something almost magical. The Roman Empire at its height was a vast network of temples, libraries, and administrative archives. Scrolls traveled with soldiers and merchants. Ideas crossed seas with missionaries and refugees. When Christianity shifted from a persecuted sect to an imperial religion, it inherited not only a spiritual mission, but also an imperial infrastructure, buildings, scribes, record keepers, even the habit of gathering and classifying the texts of conquered cultures. It is here that the first layer of legend forms. In popular imagination, the early church fathers did not simply destroy pagan libraries. They carted off what was useful and hid it. There is no direct proof that this happened systematically, yet isolated facts encourage the story. We know, for instance, that bishops ordered the copying of certain classical texts, even as others were condemned. We know that Christian scholars like Origen and Augustine engaged deeply with Greek philosophy. We know that monastic scriptoria became the keepers of knowledge during turbulent centuries. These realities, selective preservation, secret copying, and closed communities of literate men, create a plausible setting for tales of hidden scrolls and forbidden rites. The physical space of what is now Vatican City began as a necropolis, a city of the dead. Archaeological digs beneath St. Peter's Basilica have revealed rows of tombs from the 1st and 2nd centuries, decorated with pagan and Christian symbols side by side. The legend that St. Peter himself was buried here gave the site a powerful gravitational pull. By the time Emperor Constantine built the first basilica over the spot in the 4th century, the hill had become a sacred hinge between worlds, the memory of martyrdom below, imperial grandeur above. This vertical layering, tombs beneath altars, catacombs beneath chapels, is not just architecture but also metaphor. It reinforces the sense that something deeper always lies beneath, waiting to be discovered. From the 5th to the 10th century, as the Western Empire fractured, the papacy became a custodian of continuity. Pilgrims still came to the tomb of Peter. Scholars still copied texts in Latin and Greek. In a Europe of shifting kingdoms, Rome offered a rare thread of institutional memory. This, too, nourished the myths. When a place stands for unbroken tradition, people imagine it as a vault of lost ages. By the High Middle Ages, papal authority had grown enough to launch crusades, arbitrate kings, and sponsor universities. Knowledge and power once again converged, and so did suspicion. During the Renaissance, the Vatican became both a patron of learning and a target of speculation. The official founding of the Vatican Library in 1451 formalized centuries of collecting. It assembled manuscripts from across Europe and the Near East, biblical codices, patristic writings, classical works, even documents from the Council of Florence, where Eastern and Western scholars had debated theology. The scale of the collection was extraordinary for its time, but precisely because only a select few could enter its restricted rooms, the aura of secrecy thickened. Visitors glimpsed catalogs, but not contents. Scholars begged for access. Rumors spread about what lay behind locked doors. Some of those rumors mixed fact and fantasy. It is true that the library holds manuscripts in languages rarely studied in Europe at the time: Coptic, Syriac, Armenian, Arabic. It is also true that many of these texts deal with cosmology, medicine, and ritual from cultures predating Christianity. But in the public imagination, Coptic gospel became lost gospel. Arabic medical treatise became book of alchemy. Syriac chronicle became prophecy of the end times. The reality, a scholarly collection, transformed into the legend of a magical archive. In this way, the Vatican functioned as a mirror. Whatever fears or fascinations a society had about hidden knowledge, it projected onto those guarded shelves. Another potent element was language itself. Latin, the official tongue of the Church, already felt arcane to most Europeans by the early modern period. Masses were sung in a language ordinary worshippers did not understand. Papal decrees circulated in formal Latin. Manuscripts were catalogued with abbreviations and ciphers. Outsiders heard a code. Codes invite decoding. The human mind loves to believe that behind difficult words lies dangerous knowledge. Add to this the Church's own practice of designating certain texts as index prohibitorum, books prohibited to the faithful, and you have the perfect conditions for myth. Even though the index primarily banned printed works outside the Vatican, the association of forbidden books with papal vaults became inevitable. Meanwhile, architecture reinforced the mood. The Apostolic Palace, the Sistine Chapel, and later the Vatican museums formed a complex of halls, staircases, and private chambers whose very layout suggests labyrinths. Visitors are led along guided routes, while many doors remain closed. Every closed door is an invitation to imagine what's behind it. When writers and artists of the Baroque period described Rome, they often blended real topography with hints of hidden chambers. Some satirists claimed the Pope kept astrologers in a basement. Others drew maps of fictitious underground catacombs where pagan idols were stored. These texts were not meant to be factual, but readers remembered the images. At the same time, within the Church itself, debates about magic and heresy raged. The line between natural philosophy and occult practice was not always clear. Astrology, for instance, was widely studied by scholars across Europe, including clerics, until papal bulls began to restrict it in the 16th century. Alchemy, too, had both pious and suspect forms. When the Church condemned superstitious practices, it did so gradually, case by case. Legends portray this as hypocrisy, as if the Vatican secretly used what it publicly banned. More likely, it reflects the slow, uneven process by which a vast institution defines orthodoxy. Yet the perception of double standards is fertile soil for myth. All of these strands, necropolis origins, restricted libraries, Latin codes, labyrinthine halls, shifting boundaries of magic, wove together by the early modern period into a tapestry of mystery. Pilgrims saw splendor and devotion. Critics saw control and secrecy. Storytellers saw a stage for hidden dramas. Out of that stage arose enduring motifs that still circulate today. Vaults beneath the library containing the true story of Jesus, instructions for ancient rituals locked away, evidence of pre-Christian deities suppressed, but not destroyed. None of these claims have been verified, but their persistence says something about human psychology. We crave an ultimate archive where the answers are kept, and we imagine the Vatican as that place. Even the official names of Vatican institutions seem to conspire in this direction. Archivum Secretum as Secret Archive. Congregation for the Doctrine of the Faith, formerly known as the Inquisition. Pontifical Commission for Sacred Archaeology. To a neutral observer, these are bureaucratic titles. To a myth-minded observer, they are doors to hidden worlds. The Church's habit of preserving continuity by keeping old names, ceremonies, and insignia inadvertently sustains the aura of ancient power. A plain office becomes a tribunal of mystery. A private library becomes a vault of forbidden knowledge. By the time modern journalism and fiction took hold in the 19th century, the Vatican had already become a brand in the imagination, the world's smallest state, yet the richest in symbolism. Travel writers described it as a place of awe and secrecy. Novelists from Victor Hugo to Dan Brown wove thrillers around its corridors. Political pamphlets accused it of conspiracies. Occultists hinted at secret papal rites. In reality, the Vatican was grappling with modernity, the loss of the papal states, the challenge of new science, the pressures of global Catholicism. But in the myths, it remained timeless, a medieval citadel guarding magic against the encroachment of the secular world. As we move deeper into our exploration, we will trace specific stories that crystallized during these centuries. Some are dramatic, like the legend of a papal pact with a sorcerer to protect Rome. Some are subtle, like the claim that Michelangelo hid Kabbalistic symbols in the Sistine Chapel. Each reflects a moment where art, religion, and secrecy intersected. Each also tells us as much about the culture that invented the story as about the Vatican itself. For now, hold this image. A hill once dedicated to prophecy and burial, crowned by a basilica over an apostle's tomb, its archives swelling with manuscripts from every corner of the known world. Around it walls, within it labyrinths, above it a dome, and beneath it layers of older worlds. In that setting, myths do not simply appear, they almost write themselves. By the time the Renaissance reached its full brilliance, the Vatican had already become not just a seat of papal power, but an engine of myth-making. Printing presses spread rumors as fast as they spread scripture. Merchants, diplomats, artists, and pilgrims all carried away impressions of what they had glimpsed behind its marble facades. The more impressive the public spaces became, the Sistine Chapel ceiling, Raphael's frescoes, Bernini's colonnade, the more people assumed that even grander, stranger things were hidden out of sight. In a sense, the visible splendor acted as a decoy, drawing the imagination ever deeper into invisible vaults. One of the most persistent strands of Vatican mythology begins with manuscripts. Lists of treasures that must be stored in the apostolic library circulate to this day. The complete records of the lost library of Alexandria, the Chronicle of Atlantis written on copper plates, original astrological charts for every pope, formulas for summoning angels. None of these claims has been substantiated. Most can be traced back to pamphlets, anti-clerical satire, or later novels. Yet they endure because there really are locked rooms, there really are restricted documents, and there really is a tradition of secrecy. The library contains more than 80,000 codices and over 1 million printed books. Only accredited scholars may consult them, and even then only a fraction at a time. This very ordinary archival policy appears mysterious to outsiders, especially when filtered through centuries of imagination. Another rich theme is the legend of hidden gospels. Since at least the Enlightenment, writers have speculated that the Vatican holds texts which would upend Christianity, a diary of Jesus, a gospel by Mary Magdalene, prophecies about the end times. In reality, many so-called apocryphal or Gnostic gospels are well known and published. Their texts are studied openly in universities. But secrecy is a powerful amplifier. If the Church once rejected these writings, the reasoning goes, surely it must still hide something worse. Every rediscovery of a lost manuscript, like the Nag Hammadi Library in Egypt or the Dead Sea Scrolls, rekindles this suspicion. If such caches can appear in deserts and caves, why not under Rome? Art inside the Vatican has also been recruited into the mythology. Visitors staring up at Michelangelo's frescoes in the Sistine Chapel Sometimes here that the painter embedded hidden symbols, Kabbalistic diagrams, anatomical cross-sections, star maps. Scholars debate how deliberate these details were, but the legend persists that the papal court tolerated or even commissioned esoteric messages. Raphael's School of Athens is likewise interpreted as a secret manifesto of pagan philosophy inside the very halls of the Pope. Whether true or not, these stories work because the Renaissance really was a moment when classical, biblical, and mystical ideas mingled freely, and the Vatican was at the center of that mix. Beneath the public chapels, literal layers of history reinforce the myths. Excavations under St. Peter's Basilica have revealed a warren of tombs, shrines, and walls bearing ancient graffiti. In the 1940s, archaeologists confirmed a burial site they believed to be connected to St. Peter. This discovery fed a new generation of speculations. If bones and inscriptions lay hidden for so long beneath the main altar, what else might be down there? The Vatican's cave-eye tours now allow small groups to walk through these humid corridors, but only along a narrow path. Heavy gates close off side passages. The effect is cinematic, a guided glimpse into the underworld, reinforcing the sense of a much larger unseen complex. Legends about magical objects also attach themselves to the Vatican. Some claim that relics with supernatural properties are locked away. The true spear of destiny, the Ark of the Covenant, or devices of forgotten technology. Such claims usually originate in late 19th century occult literature or in conspiracy tracts from the interwar years. They reflect a broader cultural fascination with sacred science, the idea that ancient civilizations possessed advanced knowledge now hidden by elites. The Vatican, as the most visible elite institution claiming continuity with antiquity, becomes the perfect target for projection. Even the papal rituals have been read as echoes of older magic. The white smoke announcing a new pope, the Swiss Guard uniforms, the processions of relics. All these ceremonies are public, yet observers frame them as remnants of secret rites. Anthropologists would simply say that powerful symbols accumulate layers of meaning over time. A scepter, a mitre, or an incense burner can look like a magical tool to an outsider. The Church itself understands this and frequently explains the Christian reinterpretation of older symbols. But explanations rarely erase mystery, they often deepen it. One particularly resilient story involves astrology. For centuries, many European courts employed astrologers, and so did popes. Records show papal interest in star charts as late as the 16th century, when restrictions began. This historical fact feeds the myth that conclaves are still timed by the stars, or that papal decisions follow hidden planetary alignments. There is no evidence for this in modern times, yet the idea persists because it dramatizes the tension between reason and revelation, science and faith. Another concerns secret orders within the Vatican. In fiction, one often meets the Black Pope of the Jesuits, clandestine Templars in clerical disguise, or a hidden college of exorcists. In reality, the Vatican's departments are bureaucratic congregations and dicasteries, with names inherited from older times. But because titles like Congregation for the Doctrine of the Faith once referred to the Inquisition, they invite dark interpretations. The everyday paperwork of canon law becomes, in legend, the machinery of occult control. We can also trace how these myths traveled. In the 18th and 19th centuries, anti-clerical movements in Europe circulated pamphlets accusing the Vatican of hoarding knowledge to keep populations docile. In the same era, esoteric societies from Freemasons to Rosicrucians cast the papacy as a rival custodian of ancient wisdom. The resulting echo chamber meant that even mutually opposed groups agreed on one point: the Vatican was hiding something. That consensus became a narrative habit, passed down through novels, political cartoons, penny dreadfuls, and later movies. When mass tourism to Rome expanded in the 20th century, visitors encountered the contrast between the myth and the mundane. They queued for hours to glimpse a few rooms of the museums, then emerged onto St. Peter's Square feeling they had only touched the surface. This sensory experience, grand halls, glimpses of locked doors, guards with halberds, reinforces what they have already read in thrillers and tabloids. In their minds, the Vatican is not a small state struggling with archives and conservation, but a living puzzle box, a Dan Brown novel waiting to be solved. Yet behind the layers of story, there is another truth worth noticing. The Vatican really is a repository of memory, one of the few institutions to have survived the collapses, wars, and revolutions of 2 millennia. Its archives are vast because history is vast. Its rituals are complex because tradition is complex. That alone is enough to inspire awe without invoking sorcery. But our minds prefer drama to dullness. We turn conservation into conspiracy, privacy into secrecy, continuity into occult power. The myths say more about our hunger for hidden meaning than about papal policy. As we continue, we will move from the setting, the archives, the art, the rituals, to the stories themselves. We will examine two of the most famous Vatican legends in detail, tracing their origins, their evolution, and their symbolic weight. One involves a supposed pact with forbidden knowledge, the other, an alternative vision of early Christianity hidden away from the faithful. Each has crossed centuries, languages, and continents, reshaping itself for every new audience. Each reveals the patterns by which legends about power are born, grow, and endure. Hold this image as we shift into the first of these mini-epics. Candlelit chambers, a whispered formula. A pope confronted with a choice between doctrine and discovery. Whether it happened or not matters, less than why generations have told it. In that telling we glimpse our own hopes and fears reflected in the marble of St. Peter's dome. Among the many tales woven into Vatican lore, one stands out as a kind of archetype for all the others. It tells of a pope who, confronted with a forbidden manuscript, had to choose between suppressing its knowledge or letting it reshape the faith. Versions of this story appear in several languages from the late Middle Ages onward. Some place it in the vaults of the Apostolic Library, others in a hidden room beneath St. Peter's. The details shift, but the pattern is constant. A secret text, an ancient power, and a moment of decision at the very top of the church. According to one legend, a parchment surfaced during a restoration of an old basilica, a text said to contain rituals from the Temple of Solomon, formulas for summoning angelic intermediaries. A cardinal brings it to the Pope. After a night of reading by candlelight, the pontiff is shaken. The manuscript promises wisdom, but demands practices condemned as sorcery. In the morning he orders it sealed forever in the papal archive, with a warning that it not be opened until the end of days. In some versions the story ends there. In others, the Pope secretly commissions scholars to study the text and extract safe portions, which then influence church liturgy. No documentary evidence for such an event exists, yet it recurs in folklore because it dramatizes a real tension. Every large tradition inherits texts from its past, some of them troubling or ambiguous. How it handles them becomes a test of identity. A different variant replaces Solomon's rituals with an original gospel, perhaps written by a disciple not included in the canon. In these tellings, the Pope is not protecting people from magic, but from a destabilizing version of Christ's life. The sealed manuscript contains teachings about compassion and equality that would undermine hierarchy. Again, there is no historical proof, but the story resonates with modern readers because it mirrors contemporary debates about transparency and authority. We project our anxieties about hidden information onto the institution that appears most capable of hiding it. Such legends thrive because they combine three powerful elements: an object, the secret text, a gatekeeper, the Pope or the archivist, and a moral dilemma, whether to reveal or conceal. Together, these create a miniature myth of power, knowledge, and conscience. Even people with no interest in Catholic history recognize the pattern from other contexts: governments and classified documents, corporations and trade secrets, families and long-buried letters. The Vatican story is simply the most dramatic version. Historians can point to actual episodes that feed these myths. In 1600, for example, the Church placed Galileo's writings under scrutiny. In 1940, documents about the wartime papacy were sealed for decades before being opened to scholars. These were not occult manuscripts, but controversial records. Yet each case reinforces the association between the Vatican and hidden truth. It is a short, imaginative leap from restricted for political reasons to hidden because magical. The physical environment where such decisions might occur also fuels the legend. The Apostolic Palace contains chapels, libraries, private apartments, and audience halls linked by corridors lined with frescoes. For centuries, access was limited to clerics and invited guests. Even today, television cameras see only what the Vatican chooses to show. In a world used to instant transparency, any area off limits becomes a canvas for speculation. Closed doors, whispered Latin, and centuries of continuity form an irresistible stage for the drama of secrecy. Artists and writers of the Renaissance and Baroque eras helped to crystallize this image. Engravings depicted the Pope in a candlelit study, surrounded by astrological charts. Plays and pamphlets portrayed cardinals debating whether to reveal dangerous prophecies. These works were often satirical or allegorical, but later readers took them literally. In the 19th century, when Romanticism rekindled fascination with the Middle Ages, these motifs returned as evidence of a secret Vatican tradition. They slipped from art into folklore. We can see the same pattern in the story of the chronovisor, a modern legend claiming that the Vatican once possessed a device to view past events. This tale surfaced in the 1960s through a Benedictine priest named Pellegrino Ernetti, who said he had worked on such a machine with scientists. The claim was never substantiated and was later retracted, but it has endured in conspiracy circles. It follows the same script as the older myths: a miraculous object, clerical gatekeepers, and a decision to suppress it for the good of humanity. Whether it is a parchment, a gospel, or a time machine, the narrative satisfies the same hunger, that somewhere in Rome lies a key to ultimate knowledge. What these legends reveal is not a hidden Vatican, but a universal storyline. Every culture creates myths about a place where truth is stored and withheld. The Oracle of Delphi, the sealed library of Alexandria, the Akashic records of Theosophy. The Vatican simply occupies that symbolic niche in the modern West. It is both real and imagined, a city-state and a metaphor. When people say the Vatican knows, they are often speaking less about a specific building and more about the archetype of an ultimate archive. Inside the Church, the reality is more prosaic. The Vatican Library and the Apostolic Archive are enormous, but not infinite. They preserve liturgical texts, diplomatic correspondence, financial records, maps, and scholarly works. Scholars who gain access describe reading rooms, catalogs, and conservation labs, not candlelit vaults of sorcery. Yet even their dry descriptions cannot erase centuries of storytelling. For most of us, the mental picture of a papal archivist sliding a key into a heavy iron door is more vivid than microfilm reels and climate-controlled shelves. That is why the first mini-film in our narrative, The Pope and the Forbidden Manuscript, endures. It is not about one document, but about the very idea of hidden knowledge and moral choice. It dramatizes questions that transcend religion. Is their knowledge too dangerous to share? Who decides? Can secrecy be virtuous? The Vatican legend simply gives these questions a setting grand enough to match their weight. As we continue, we will explore a second major thread of myth, one that shifts from text to symbols. If the first legend centers on hidden words, the second centers on visible emblems, animals, numbers, shapes, and rituals interpreted as codes of secret meaning. From obelisks to keys, from colors of vestments to architectural alignments, the Vatican is covered in symbols. Some are straightforward, some inherited from older cultures, some subject to debate. In this symbolic field, myth and history intertwine even more tightly. Hold that thought. A city of marble where every object might be a clue, every procession a reenactment of something older, every number a message. In the next movement of our story, we step into this symbolic landscape, tracing how ordinary signs became charged with the aura of forbidden knowledge. Step now into the Vatican not as a building of marble and offices, but as a landscape of signs. Even before a visitor enters St. Peter's Square, symbolism rises from every stone. The elliptical plaza designed by Bernini embraces pilgrims like two arms. At its center, an Egyptian obelisk stands upright, flanked by fountains representing life and purification. Around the edge, 284 columns form 4 rows like a cosmic colonnade. Above them, 140 statues of saints look down. Nothing here is accidental. Every element carries a meaning in Catholic theology, but because many of the shapes and objects also existed in pre-Christian cultures, they invite more speculative readings. Take the obelisk itself, carved in Heliopolis thousands of years ago. It once stood beside the Circus of Nero, where early Christians were martyred. Pope Sixtus V had it moved in 1586 to the center of the new square. Officially, it is a sign of triumph, the pagan stone now crowned with a cross. But to the myth-minded, its presence is evidence of an unbroken thread between Egyptian solar cults and Vatican ritual. They note its precise alignment with the basilica, its shadow marking seasonal changes, its base engraved with Latin exorcisms. Even the copper sphere that once topped it, rumored to hold the ashes of Julius Caesar, becomes a vessel of mystery. Such readings multiply across Vatican territory. The keys and tiara on the papal coat of arms are interpreted as alchemical symbols. The Swiss Guard uniforms, designed in the Renaissance with slashed sleeves and bright colors, are imagined as coded references to medieval orders. The bronze canopy over St. Peter's tomb by Bernini is said to echo the tent of the Arkansas. None of these associations is officially acknowledged, yet each finds an audience because the visible objects are real and striking. Where symbols accumulate, legends follow. Inside the basilica, the atmosphere deepens. The floor of St. Peter's is marked with discs indicating the lengths of other great churches, a subtle map of global Catholicism. Inside chapels, mosaics shimmer with stars, doves, lambs, and palm branches, images whose meanings shifted over centuries. The four main piers are dedicated to relics of saints, including a fragment of the true cross. Above all rises Michelangelo's dome, modeled on the Pantheon, drawing the eye to heaven. This layering of pagan form and Christian content is deliberate, yet it also feeds the idea that the Church encodes messages from older traditions into its architecture. Numbers play their part. Pilgrims notice 3s, 7s, 12s, 40s, biblical numbers that also appear in astrology, Pythagoreanism, and magic. Steps in certain staircases, windows in certain facades, and panels in certain doors seem to echo sacred ratios. Whether this reflects hidden intent or simply the universal appeal of symmetry, it encourages the myth of a Vatican code. Books and documentaries take viewers on tours of alignment lines through the city, connecting obelisks, churches, and palaces into geometric figures. Historians may point out that the patterns arise from practical urban planning, but the shapes on a map look like sigils to a willing eye. Ritual likewise blurs into mystery. The smoke that signals a papal election, the triple ringing of bells, the carrying of the fisherman's ring, all are public acts. Yet to outsiders they resemble the stages of a rite. Because the Church does not publish every detail of its ceremonial protocols, observers fill the gaps with their own interpretations. Some claim the colors of vestments track astrological hours. Others read the liturgical calendar as a cipher for ancient festivals. Even if these ideas have no basis in fact, the rhythm of Catholic worship, seasons, feasts, fasts, shares enough with older agricultural and lunar cycles to appear like a hidden script. A classic example is the use of incense. In Catholic liturgy, it represents prayer rising to heaven, a practice inherited from Jewish temple worship. But to myth-makers it signals continuity with pagan sacrifices or magical fumigations. Another is holy water. For the Church, a sacramental reminder of baptism. For the speculative mind, a remnant of purification rites stretching back to the Nile. In each case, the official meaning and the imagined meaning coexist, feeding a sense of secret depth. Art commissions of the Renaissance also embedded layers of symbolism. Raphael's Disputa and School of Athens, Michelangelo's frescoes of the prophets and sibyls, the zodiac signs carved into floors. All are documented and can be explained theologically. Yet they also reflect a time when scholars freely borrowed from classical, biblical, and mystical sources. When viewers today spot a star chart behind a prophet or an anatomical outline in God's cloak, they may be seeing real references or simply patterns. Either way, the perception strengthens the myth that Vatican art encodes a higher knowledge accessible only to initiates. Even the colors of vestments become a canvas for speculation. White for Easter, red for martyrs, green for ordinary time, violet for penitence. These are published rules. But some writers suggest a second layer, that certain hues or fabrics are worn on unannounced feast days to signal hidden transitions. the lack of evidence does not stop the theory. It continues because it transforms ordinary ceremonial life into a living puzzle. Underlying all this is a simple psychological principle. When people encounter a dense environment of symbols whose meanings they do not fully know, they assume an esoteric order. Anthropologists call this symbolic surplus. The Vatican is perhaps the richest symbolic environment on Earth. Visitors arrive primed by centuries of novels and documentaries. Every closed door, every Latin inscription, every ritual gesture becomes a clue in a cosmic treasure hunt. From the Church's perspective, most of this is a misunderstanding. Catholic symbolism developed over centuries through liturgy, scripture, and local custom. Obelisks were repurposed to proclaim Christ's victory. Numbers reflect biblical narratives. Vestments follow a clear code. But because the Vatican also prizes continuity, rarely discarding old forms even when their original context fades, its ceremonies can look to outsiders like the fossilized remains of a cult practice. Continuity reads as secrecy. That is why, in mythic retellings, the Vatican becomes less a religious center and more a cipher. It is pictured as a living codex whose pages are marble and whose ink is ritual. Some see this as evidence of ancient magic preserved under a Christian veneer. Others, more charitably, see it as a testimony to humanity's instinct to weave new meaning from old forms. Either way, the symbols of the Vatican serve as the perfect canvas for projection. Having crossed this symbolic terrain, we are ready to follow two of the most famous hidden knowledge stories to their roots. One dealing with an alleged pact of forbidden power, the other with a vision of early Christianity said to be too radical to reveal. By tracing how each emerged, evolved, and entered popular culture, we can watch myth in motion, not as static folklore, but as a living process. Picture, then, a night lit by candles in a frescoed chamber. A pope or cardinal bends over a manuscript. Outside, the obelisk casts a moonlit shadow across the square. Inside, a decision is about to be made, to release a revelation or to seal it away. Whether real or imagined, this is the moment at the heart of every Vatican legend, the convergence of symbol, secrecy, and power. The first of the two mini-films hidden inside the larger legend is often called the Pact of Forbidden Power. It does not appear in any single medieval chronicle, but shows up as a cluster of rumors across Italy, France, and Germany from the 1400s onward. Each retelling dresses the story in its own clothes, yet the skeleton stays the same. A pontiff or cardinal stumbles upon a formula that promises supernatural influence. In exchange, it demands a compromise of faith. The Church, confronted with this knowledge, must decide whether to suppress it or quietly make use of it. In one version, the manuscript found under a collapsing monastery describes how the high priests of Jerusalem summoned angelic warriors. In another, it holds Egyptian rites of the dead, translated into Latin by a renegade monk. In yet another, it is a Greek text on theurgy smuggled from Byzantium. A pope reads it in secret, prays for guidance, then orders it sealed with 7 seals and hidden in the papal archive until the last trumpet sounds. Some later storytellers embellish the scene. The room lit only by beeswax candles, the pontiff's shadow crossing a floor tiled with zodiac signs, the muffled sound of guards in the corridor. Nothing in the historical record confirms such an episode, but the tableau is so vivid that people remember it as if it had been recorded. This legend resonates because there really were debates in the late Middle Ages and Renaissance about the boundary between natural magic, angelology, and heresy. Figures like Marsilio Ficino and Pico della Mirandola attempted to reconcile Christian theology with Neoplatonic and Hermetic ideas. Popes sponsored astrologers to choose auspicious dates for coronations. Even as the Church condemned sorcery, it tolerated or engaged with forms of knowledge later labeled occult. The myth of a papal pact with forbidden power is essentially a dramatization of that historical gray zone. It also reflects a deeper archetype, the custodian who holds a dangerous tool. Many cultures tell of kings, shamans, or high priests who guard a secret that could destroy the world if misused. In the Vatican story, the Pope becomes that figure, not just the shepherd of souls, but the keeper of a sealed box of power. This image turns an administrative office into a mythic role, elevating the papacy from a historical institution into a character in an epic. Modern literature and film have amplified the motif. 19th century anticlerical novels imagined popes using hidden spells to influence politics. 20th century thrillers recast it as secret technologies or coded prophecies. In the 21st century, the internet recycles these ideas as memes about Vatican archives of time travel or exorcism manuals from Atlantis. The core structure remains the same: a gatekeeper, a dangerous knowledge, and a moral decision. What the legend misses, but what history shows, is that secrecy in the Vatican has generally been about diplomacy, not sorcery. The Apostolic Archive holds state papers, correspondence with monarchs, records of internal investigations. Access is restricted for privacy and conservation. Yet because diplomatic secrecy lacks drama, the public imagination substitutes forbidden power. The real and the imagined run in parallel tracks. Even so, the myth contains an insight about how knowledge functions in large institutions. Every archive has materials that are controversial, embarrassing, or simply too complex for casual release. Every religion has texts and practices that evolve, leaving behind traces of older ideas. The Vatican's scale and continuity make it the ultimate stage for that universal reality. In this sense, the legend of the Pact of Forbidden Power, though untrue as history, is true as a symbol. It expresses our ambivalence about knowledge. We want it revealed, yet fear its consequences. From this first mini-film, we can watch how myth layers over time. It starts as a whisper about a document. It acquires a dramatic setting: candlelight, catacombs, papal apartments. It gains a moral frame: the dilemma of revelation versus concealment. Then it migrates into culture: pamphlets, novels, screenplays. Eventually it returns to tourists and viewers who come to Rome already carrying the story in their heads, seeing every locked door as confirmation. This dynamic leads naturally into the second great thread: an alternative vision of early Christianity hidden from the faithful. Whereas the first legend centers on a pact for power, the second centers on a gospel of radical simplicity, a teaching so pure and challenging that it would overturn hierarchy if released. In these tales, the Vatican is not hoarding magic but suppressing compassion, not guarding sorcery but hiding truth. The supposed text is sometimes described as the Book of the Nazarene or the Gospel of the Beloved Disciple. It teaches, according to legend, that all believers are equal, that rituals are unnecessary, that salvation lies in direct experience rather than in church mediation. Again, there is no historical evidence for such a document. Yet the myth thrives because apocryphal writings really do exist. The Gospel of Thomas, the Gospel of Mary, the Gospel of Judas. These texts, discovered in deserts and caves, present alternative voices from the early Christian movement. Scholars debate their meaning openly, but popular culture frames them as suppressed secrets. Each new discovery feeds the narrative that something even more radical must still be locked away. This second legend also taps into modern themes of transparency and empowerment. In an age of leaks and whistleblowers, people expect hidden files. They imagine the Vatican as the last fortress of undisclosed information. Stories of a suppressed gospel mirror our own frustrations with opaque institutions. They recast theological history as a thriller about censorship. The Church becomes not only the gatekeeper of dangerous power, but the jailer of liberating truth. It is worth noting, however, that when the Nag Hammadi texts were found in 1945 or the Dead Sea Scrolls in 1947, the discoveries did not come from Vatican vaults, but from accidental digs in Egypt and Israel. The documents were published and studied widely. The idea that the Vatican still sits on even more explosive material persists because it satisfies a psychological need. The hope that somewhere, someone holds the key to ultimate answers, and the drama of imagining its release. Together these two mini-films, The Pact for Power and The Hidden Gospel, form a kind of yin and yang of Vatican mythology. One casts the Church as secretly mighty, the other as secretly subversive. One fears the Pope as a sorcerer, the other longs for him as a reformer. Both feed on the same conditions: closed archives, complex rituals, and an institution old enough to absorb contradictions. and both show how myths about power tell us as much about ourselves as about their supposed subject. Picture, then, the scene at the heart of the second legend. Not candlelit sorcery, but a quiet study lined with Greek manuscripts. A pontiff reads a text that speaks of radical equality. Outside, pilgrims cross the square unaware. Inside, a choice is made. Release the teaching and risk chaos, or file it away for another age. Whether or not such a moment ever occurred, the image remains compelling because it gives narrative form to our questions about truth, authority, and secrecy. As we leave these two stories, notice how smoothly they blend with the symbols described earlier. The obelisk, the keys, the locked doors, the Latin titles, all become props in a shared theater. Even if the actual Vatican is only an archive and a museum, the Vatican of the imagination is a stage set for these dramas. And once a stage exists, stories will fill it. If the first 6 movements of our journey have been about place, manuscripts, and whispered stories, this next one is about meaning. Myths about the Vatican do not survive simply because they are mysterious. They survive because they are symbolically fertile. The obelisk in St. Peter's Square, the papal keys, the hidden manuscripts, the rumors of secret pacts. Each becomes a vessel into which successive generations pour their own hopes and fears. Understanding this symbolic engine is the key to understanding why these legends have endured for centuries. In anthropology, the term syncretism describes how symbols migrate from one culture to another, taking on new meanings while carrying echoes of the old. Catholicism's global reach and long memory make it a champion of syncretism. Processions, vestments, architectural forms, even the calendar itself, were shaped by centuries of adaptation. The result is a landscape of signs that feel both familiar and strange. A lamb on a mosaic may be simply Christ as the sacrificial lamb, or, to a viewer versed in mystery religions, a vestige of older pastoral deities. The Church does not hide these resonances, it baptizes them. Yet to outsiders the layering looks like encryption. Numbers are a good example. 3 stands for the Trinity, 7 for the gifts of the Spirit, 12 for apostles, 40 for testing. But these same numbers recur in astrology, Pythagorean philosophy, and magical grimoires. When a visitor sees 12 niches in a chapel or 7 steps to an altar, it is easy to think of a hidden code. Architects may have chosen the proportions for theological, aesthetic, or structural reasons. The myth-minded see a cipher. Animals also carry double meanings. Doves signify the Holy Spirit, but also Venus in classical iconography. Lions mark courage in St. Mark, but also Mithraic strength. Serpents appear as symbols of evil, yet also of healing. When Bernini carved bees into papal crests, he was referencing the Barberini family emblem. Later writers interpreted them as signs of hidden alchemical work. This is how symbols function in living traditions. Their meanings shift and overlap. A culture fluent in one layer may be baffled by another. Ritual amplifies this effect. The Catholic liturgical year mirrors natural cycles: Advent in winter darkness, Easter in spring, Pentecost at harvest time in some regions. These rhythms descend from Jewish calendars, but also parallel older agricultural festivals. To believers, they dramatize salvation history. To skeptics, they look like coded continuity with pagan rites. The Church publishes its calendar openly, yet books appear each year promising to reveal the hidden pagan origins of every feast. Myth thrives in the gap between shared symbols and private interpretations. Architecture is another canvas. The Vatican museums are arranged not only by art historical periods, but also by papal patronage, resulting in a sequence of rooms that can be walked in many ways. Tourists following guidebooks trace energy lines across the floors. Some see a giant key shape in the city plan. In reality, the street grid reflects centuries of piecemeal building, but once a pattern is drawn on a map, it becomes hard to unsee. The myth does not require the pattern to be deliberate, only visible. Why do these projections matter? Because they show how the Vatican operates as a mythic mirror. Whatever a society is currently fascinated by, secret societies, astrology, feminism, lost technology, it imagines inside those walls. In the Enlightenment, the rumor was that the Pope hoarded scientific instruments. In the Romantic era, it was forbidden gospels. In the Cold War, it was dossiers on alien life. In the digital age, it is time travel machines or data about extraterrestrials. The setting stays the same. The content of the myth updates with each generation's obsessions. This is not unique to Catholicism. Tibet once served a similar role in Western imagination, a hidden kingdom of sages in the Himalayas. Ancient Egypt still functions as a shorthand for mystery and lost wisdom. The Vatican simply holds a privileged place because it is real, accessible, and visibly old. Pilgrims can stand in its square, look up at its dome, and feel the centuries pressing down. That tangible presence makes the myths more persuasive than rumors of hidden Himalayan monasteries or sunken Atlantean archives. Inside the Church, scholars are aware of this dynamic. Vatican guides often address myths directly on tours, explaining the real origins of symbols. Yet even these explanations become part of the story. If they are denying it so carefully, maybe it's true. This is a paradox of secrecy. Transparency does not always dispel mystery. Sometimes it deepens it. Every disclosure invites a new question about what remains undisclosed. Psychologically, myths about hidden knowledge serve several functions. They dramatize our ambivalence about authority. We want leaders to protect us, but suspect them of hoarding power. They express our hunger for ultimate answers, believing that somewhere, someone already knows. They externalize our own ethical dilemmas. Imagining a pope deciding what is too dangerous to share spares us from confronting our own decisions about truth and harm. In this sense, the Vatican is less a villain or hero than a screen on which we project ourselves. Seen in this light, even the two mini-films from the previous section take on a new meaning. The Pact of Forbidden Power mirrors our fear of misused science, nuclear weapons, artificial intelligence, genetic manipulation. The Hidden Gospel mirrors our hope for liberating disclosure, a cure for disease, a secret for free energy, a message of universal equality. Both are modern concerns dressed in Renaissance robes. Both find in the Vatican a theater grand enough for their moral weight. Understanding this does not make the myths disappear, but it can change how we listen to them. Instead of asking, is it true? We can ask, why do we need it to be true? Instead of treating the Vatican as a vault of literal magic, we can see it as a living museum of symbols, a place where the human impulse to encode meaning has been operating for 2,000 years. That is itself remarkable. Few institutions preserve continuity across so many cultures and eras. The Vatican does, and in doing so it inevitably becomes a magnet for myths. Imagine, then, walking once more through St. Peter's Square. The obelisk casts its shadow. Bells toll from the dome. Pilgrims cross themselves and take photographs. Around you is not a coded conspiracy, but a palimpsest of human meaning, layer upon layer, generation upon generation. Some of those layers are official, others imagined. Together, they create the aura of mystery that draws millions every year, not because the Vatican hides magic, but because we bring our own. This is the pivot point of our story. Having traced the origins of the myths, the symbols that sustain them, and the archetypes they express, we can now look outward. How these ideas have echoed into the wider world, into language, festivals, literature, film, and even popular games. In other words, the Vatican not just as a subject of legend, but as a source of culture. Step outside the Vatican walls for a moment, and you begin to see how its myths have radiated into the wider world. Legends about hidden gospels and forbidden power do not stay locked inside archives. They travel outward, shape language, influence holidays, inspire novels and games, and even frame how people talk about secrecy and authority in completely unrelated fields. In this way, the Vatican becomes not only a subject of myth, but also a generator of cultural symbols. Take language first. Expressions like Vatican secret or papal hush appear in newspapers to describe any situation of institutional secrecy. The word conclave, from cum clave, with a key, has become a shorthand for a closed-door decision-making session in politics, business, or sports. When a tech company prepares a product in secrecy, journalists call it Apple's own Vatican. None of these metaphors have anything to do with religion, but all draw power from the image of Rome as the ultimate sealed chamber. Then there are the festivals. Many Catholic feast days have become public holidays, often stripped of their theological meaning, but retaining ritual shapes. Candles at Christmas, eggs at Easter, saints' processions in Southern Europe and Latin America. Because some of these symbols predate Christianity or resemble older agricultural customs, writers regularly publish articles about their pagan origins. This cycle reinforces the myth of a Vatican quietly carrying ancient magic forward under new names, even when the Church has openly published the origins and meanings of its feasts. Popular literature amplifies the effect, from the Gothic novels of the 1800s through thrillers of the 2000s. The Vatican appears again and again as a stage for conspiracies and revelations. Victor Hugo's The Hunchback of Notre Dame has a priest dabbling in alchemy. Joris Karl Huysmans hinted at satanic masses in Rome. Umberto Eco's The Name of the Rose turned monastic libraries into crime scenes. Dan Brown's Angels and Demons revived the image of a secret scientific brotherhood under St. Peter's. These fictions reach far more people than scholarly histories do. Tourists arrive in Rome already primed by the stories. Every locked door feels like a clue. Every Latin inscription a cipher. Cinema multiplies the imagery. Black cassocks and red hats signal intrigue. Candlelit catacombs and marble halls set the mood for secret meetings. Even films with no religious theme borrow this visual vocabulary when they want to suggest hidden power. Video games do the same. Players explore digital cathedrals, solve puzzles in secret archives, and uncover fictional lost keys of St. Peter. The Vatican becomes a genre, a shorthand for mystery, conspiracy, and sacred aesthetics. This cultural echo extends beyond entertainment. Conspiracy theories about hidden cures, alien contact, or time travel devices frequently cite the Vatican as the silent custodian. A rumor about suppressed archaeological finds in the Middle East? The Vatican took it. A rumor about a prophet's lost book? It's in the Vatican. Even when the Church issues detailed denials, the narrative persists because it serves a psychological need. In a world of fragmented authority, people imagine a single center that knows, a vault that holds the truth behind appearances. Yet the same institution also inspires opposite myths of openness and universality. Pilgrims and tourists describe the Vatican as a place where cultures meet, where art from every continent is displayed, where masses are said in dozens of languages. Documentaries show archivists preserving ancient manuscripts with state-of-the-art technology. This positive image, the Vatican as caretaker of world heritage, coexists with the darker one of hoarder of forbidden secrets. Both flow from the same reality, a tiny city-state that has been collecting texts, art, and rituals for 2 millennia. These echoes shape not only how we view the Church, but how we imagine power itself. When journalists talk about white smoke from a corporate boardroom or papal infallibility of a tech CEO, they are drawing on centuries of Vatican imagery. When a thriller writer sets a plot about a secret council, they instinctively model its atmosphere on a conclave. Even the cliché of ancient archives under lock and key in fantasy novels owes something to Rome. The myths of the Vatican have become templates for our broader myths about knowledge and authority. What makes this feedback loop remarkable is its persistence. Each new generation reinvents the Vatican myth to fit its own anxieties. In the Cold War, it was files on communism and nuclear secrets. In the 1990s, it was coded prophecies and millennium fears. In the 2020s, it is hidden technologies and extraterrestrial contact. The stage stays the same, the script changes. This adaptability is why the myths remain vivid even when specific claims are debunked. Anthropologists would say that the Vatican functions as a symbolic center, a point around which narratives of mystery, control, and transcendence orbit. Psychologists might say it satisfies both our need for a fatherly protector and our suspicion of a hidden manipulator. Storytellers simply see a perfect setting: ancient walls, labyrinthine corridors, priceless art, and a global audience. No other institution offers such a ready-made blend of credibility and mystique. At the same time, the Vatican itself has begun to acknowledge and even manage its image. Archives once sealed for 75 years are now opened after 60. Digital catalogs are available online. Guided tours of underground excavations are offered to small groups. These moves have not killed the myths. They have given them new life. Visitors post photographs of closed doors on social media with captions like, What are they hiding? Transparency feeds curiosity rather than ending it. Imagine the scene once more. A traveler leaving St. Peter's Square at dusk, smartphone full of images, mind full of questions. Outside the walls, the city of Rome bustles. Inside, the archives sleep under climate control. Between the two lies a vast zone of speculation, where novels, documentaries, and internet forums build ever new versions of the same old story. In that zone, the Vatican stops being just a religious microstate and becomes a canvas for humanity's imagination about hidden knowledge. This is where our narrative now turns toward its final movements. Not new legends, but reflections on why they matter. What do these myths teach about our relationship with secrecy, authority, and the past? Why do we return again and again to the image of a sealed vault of ultimate truth? And what can the real history of the Vatican tell us about the persistence of mystery in a supposedly transparent age? Hold these questions as we move to the next part of our journey. A look at how scholars, scientists, and believers alike have tried to separate legend from fact, and what that tells us about the human need for myth itself. The deeper we travel into these stories, the more we realize that what surrounds the Vatican is less a single conspiracy and more a long experiment in how people handle mystery. Scholars, journalists, and believers have spent decades trying to separate legend from fact. Their efforts tell us as much about ourselves as about the archives in Rome. A useful starting point is the Apostolic Archive itself, formerly called the Secret Archive. In Latin, secretum means private or personal, not hidden from the world. The name originally signified the Pope's private state papers, separate from the public library. Yet as modern languages shifted, secret came to imply forbidden, and a myth was born. No deliberate deception was required. A simple translation drift turned an administrative archive into a vault of occult knowledge. This is a textbook example of how myth can grow from a tiny factual seed. When the Vatican began gradually opening the archive to qualified researchers in the late 19th century, reality looked far more mundane than fantasy. Tens of thousands of boxes containing papal correspondence, financial ledgers, treaties, and court cases. Scholars sifted through marriage dispensations, diplomatic reports, and letters from missionaries. Some discoveries were fascinating. Insights into medieval diplomacy, new details about Galileo's trial, but none matched the public's expectation of apocalyptic prophecies or sorcery manuals. Yet the legend did not fade. People simply moved the mystery deeper. Those are only the files they let us see. This phenomenon is familiar to historians of secrecy. Every disclosure produces a new suspicion about what remains unrevealed. Governments declassify documents. Conspiracy theories shift to the real files still hidden. In psychology, this is called the hidden remainder effect. When a long-guarded secret proves ordinary, the mind invents a deeper layer to preserve the sense of drama. The Vatican's very act of opening its archive inadvertently strengthened the myth of a deeper, locked vault. Science offers another lens on these stories. Anthropologists note that myths cluster around places of liminality, thresholds between worlds. The Vatican sits literally on such a threshold, a burial ground turned into a basilica, a microstate inside a city, a spiritual center acting as a political entity. In many cultures, thresholds are where the sacred and the dangerous meet. City gates, temple doorways, river crossings. Legends of hidden power naturally gravitate to liminal spaces. The Vatican is the ultimate threshold, ancient yet modern, secretive yet public, sacred yet political. Historians of religion add that Christianity itself emerged from a world full of mystery cults, secret teachings, and initiation rites. Early Christians adapted some of that language, but moved toward public proclamation. Over time, the Church defined orthodoxy partly by rejecting hidden doctrines. Yet as the institution became larger and older, it developed layers of administration and restricted areas, practical, not esoteric. Outsiders saw the layers, but not the reasons, and assumed continuity with mystery traditions. In this way, the Vatican becomes a mirror reflecting back the very religious environment from which Christianity arose. There's also a psychological dimension. Myths about a powerful institution, hoarding knowledge, externalize our ambivalence about authority. On one hand, we hope someone wise is safeguarding dangerous information. On the other hand, we fear manipulation. These are two sides of the same archetype, the wise guardian versus the secretive controller. The Vatican's age, art, and ritual make it an ideal screen for that archetype. Even people with no connection to Catholicism project their cultural anxieties onto its walls. Scholars who study conspiracy thinking note how easily this projection adapts to new themes. In the 1800s, pamphlets accused the Pope of controlling European monarchs with hidden gospels. In the 1900s, anti-Catholic tracts claimed secret ties to Freemasons or communists. In the 2000s, internet forums replaced hidden gospels with hidden alien technology. The narrative stays stable while the content updates to whatever a society currently fears or desires. The Vatican myth is thus not a single claim but a framework, a ready-made plot for new worries. At the same time, there are genuine examples of secrecy in church history. Some doctrinal debates were held behind closed doors. Some archives remained sealed for decades. Certain exorcism manuals are not publicly distributed, partly out of concern for misuse. These realities provide hooks for legend. They are understandable policies. Yet to an outsider, they look like confirmation of rumor. The boundary between prudent privacy and occult secrecy blurs in perception. Anthropologists often compare the Vatican myth to the legends surrounding Tibet or Shambhala in the Western imagination, a hidden kingdom of sages guarding ancient wisdom. Both are real places with real traditions. Both were turned into metaphors for hidden truth. Egypt functions similarly. Pyramids as cosmic code, hieroglyphs as magic. The Vatican stands out because it is a living institution in the heart of a major city. People can photograph its guards and domes while imagining labyrinths below. Interestingly, believers and skeptics both use the myth to their advantage. Critics portray the Vatican as hiding scandal or sorcery. Admirers portray it as safeguarding treasures too sacred for public consumption. Both assume a hidden depth. This double use explains the myth's resilience. It can be framed as villainous secrecy or as noble stewardship, depending on the audience's needs. What do these patterns tell us? That myths about hidden knowledge are not simply mistakes to be corrected, but stories we tell to negotiate our relationship with power and mystery. They dramatize our questions. What is truth? Who owns it? How should it be revealed? The Vatican is compelling because it is real enough to anchor the questions, yet mysterious enough to keep them alive. As modern scholarship expands, a more balanced picture emerges. Historians of Christianity trace how rituals and symbols developed step by step. Art historians show how pagan motifs were reinterpreted. Archivists describe the slow work of cataloging manuscripts. None of this negates the magic of the place. In fact, it reveals a different kind of wonder, the wonder of continuity, preservation, and human creativity. The Vatican as it actually exists is already astonishing without needing secret gospels or time machines. Imagine a researcher at a wooden desk in the Apostolic Archive. Around her are boxes labeled in neat Latin script. She opens one and finds not a prophecy of the end times, but a missionary's letter from Peru, written in the 1600s, describing local customs and weather. It is ordinary, yet it connects continents and centuries. That is the real power of the archive, a web of memory linking worlds. But to most of us, a letter from Peru does not satisfy the appetite for mystery. We want angels, aliens, or suppressed gospels. So the myth continues. As we approach the conclusion of our journey, the task is not to debunk, but to integrate. What does it mean that millions of people visit a place each year expecting something hidden? What does it say about our culture that secrecy itself has become a form of entertainment? And what can the Vatican myth teach about the persistence of mystery in a supposedly transparent digital age? Hold those questions. In the final movement, we will step back from the archives, the obelisks, and the rumors, and look at the larger picture. Why this legend matters now, what it reveals about us, and how it can inspire rather than mislead. Step back now from the marble, the manuscripts, the myths, and imagine looking down at Vatican City from above. It is not a boundless labyrinth, but a tiny walled enclave, a postage stamp of stone and gardens within the sprawl of Rome. And yet inside this smallest of sovereign states reside some of the largest stories ever told about secrecy, power, and sacred knowledge. What we have traced across the last 9 movements is not a dossier of hidden facts, but the life of a living legend. How a real place became the stage for humanity's fascination with the unknown. One of the first lessons of that legend is about continuity. The Vatican stands on a hill that has been a burial ground, a place of prophecy, a site of martyrdom, a seat of empire, a center of pilgrimage, and now the heart of a global church. That unbroken chain across 2 millennia creates an aura that no modern institution can replicate. Continuity invites projection. People imagine that if the place has lasted so long, its walls must hold ancient power. In reality, they hold paper and stone. But paper and stone can themselves be powerful when they link generations. A second lesson is about symbols. Obelisks, keys, vestments, numbers, animals, and rituals are not codes in a secret cipher, but living signs in a tradition that constantly reinterprets its past. Yet because symbols can carry multiple meanings, they act like mirrors. Visitors bring their own stories and see them reflected. A skeptic sees occult traces. A believer sees sacred heritage. A novelist sees a plot. The same object sustains all 3 readings. This is not deception, but the nature of symbol itself. It condenses complexity into a form that can travel through time. A third lesson is about secrecy. Every large organization keeps some things private. Personnel files, diplomatic cables, financial ledgers. In the Vatican, this ordinary privacy has been magnified by translation quirks, secret archive, restricted access for preservation, and centuries of polemic. Out of these prosaic facts, a mythology of vaults, pacts, and hidden gospels has grown. The myths are not literally true, but they dramatize real questions about how knowledge should be handled. They ask, is their wisdom too dangerous to share? Can secrecy ever be virtuous? What does it mean to guard tradition in an age that demands transparency? A fourth lesson is about culture. Legends about the Vatican have escaped their birthplace and now shape how the world imagines secrecy itself. Journalists speak of white smoke from boardrooms. Thriller writers model conspiracies on conclaves. Video games let players explore fictional Vatican catacombs. Even metaphors for non-religious secrecy. Hidden files, lost libraries, forbidden archives, owe something to Rome. The Vatican is not only a subject of myth, it has become a template for myth-making. All of this points to a final insight. Myths about hidden knowledge tell us more about us than about the Vatican. They reveal our mixed feelings about authority, our craving for ultimate answers, our hope that someone, somewhere, already knows. They externalize our dilemmas about science, ethics, and power. In the Pact of Forbidden Power, we see our fear of misused technology. In the Hidden Gospel, we see our hope for a liberating disclosure. In the symbols, we see our own urge to weave continuity from fragments. The Vatican's walls simply give these longings a stage grand enough to be credible. If you walk through St. Peter's Square with this perspective, the place looks different. The obelisk is no longer a clue to secret magic, but a witness to cultural layering. The colonnade is no longer an embrace hiding mysteries, but an embrace welcoming pilgrims from every nation. The basilica's dome is not a lid on a vault, but a beacon of continuity rising above the city. The actual archives, far from being dungeons of sorcery, are a testament to preservation, a rare example of an institution trying, however imperfectly, to remember the past in a world that forgets. Does that mean the Vatican is demystified? Not entirely. Mystery is not only about secrecy, it is also about awe. Standing beneath Michelangelo's ceiling or in the dim necropolis below the basilica, one feels a genuine sense of threshold, not because of hidden spells, but because of the depth of history, art, and human devotion concentrated in one place. That awe is a kind of mystery worth keeping, the kind that inspires curiosity rather than fear. Perhaps this is why the legends endure. They are not only cautionary tales about secret power, they are also invitations to imagine. They tell us that knowledge matters, that archives matter, that decisions about what to reveal and what to protect are morally significant. They dramatize our own relationship with truth and authority. In a world of instant information, they remind us that some things, context, continuity, meaning, cannot be downloaded. They must be stewarded, interpreted, and sometimes slowly revealed. Seen in this light, the Vatican myth can be inspiring rather than misleading. It shows that institutions can become symbols larger than themselves, and that symbols can carry many layers of meaning without losing their core. It also shows that even in an age of transparency, mystery has a role, not as a cover for manipulation, but as a space for wonder. If we approach the legend with curiosity rather than credulity, it can teach us about history, culture, and our own imaginations. So, as our long retelling draws to a close, picture once more the traveler at dusk leaving St. Peter's Square. Behind her the dome glows, the obelisk casts a long shadow, bells echo over the rooftops. In her mind are not answers to every secret, but a richer appreciation of how stories grow around places that endure. The Vatican remains what it has always been, a small city of stone and memory, a stage where humanity rehearses its drama of hidden knowledge and revealed faith. And perhaps that is the greatest hidden truth of all, that the mystery we seek behind those walls has been within us the entire time, in our own hunger for meaning and continuity.